My name is Claire Morgan. My mother didn't speak to me for 5 years, blocked every call, returned every letter. Then 1 week before Christmas, she invited me to dinner, right after finding out I sold my company for $150 million. If you've lived through something similar, tell me in the comments. The last time my mother spoke to me before that night, she told me not to come back until I learned how to listen. After that, my number was blocked, letters came back unopened. 5 years passed like that. The apartment in San Jose still smelled faintly of burnt coffee from the meeting that had just ended. Laptops were closed, the team had logged off, and the draft acquisition agreement sat on my screen with tracked changes, waiting for someone braver than me to click accept. It was late, the kind of late where emails stop feeling urgent and start feeling personal. That was when my phone lit up with a missed call. No name, just an area code from the town where I grew up. A voicemail icon appeared. That alone felt wrong. My number had been blocked for half a decade. Still, the message downloaded. I pressed play. Hi, Claire. It's Mom. We're doing Christmas dinner this year. Sunday, 6 o'clock. Let me know if you're coming. No apology, no pause, just logistics, like she was calling about a package delivery. I stood there longer than I should have, then called the number back before I could talk myself out of it. She answered on the second ring. Hello? It's me, I said. A beat passed, barely noticeable. I know, Margaret said. You still sound the same. So do you. She ignored that. Are you in California right now? She asked. Yes. San Jose, right? That was new information. I hadn't shared my address with anyone back home. I heard you're doing pretty well, she continued. Seems like things worked out. Who told you that? You know how people talk. They hadn't talked to me in years. Why now? The question came out flatter than expected. Another brief pause. Well, she said, it's Christmas. That hasn't stopped you before. She sighed, the same controlled exhale I remembered from childhood. Are you still using your old email, the one with your name? Yes. Good. Dinner's at 6. Before the call ended, the line went dead. The laptop on the counter chimed. A notification popped up. An email from an old family address showed a recent access time from earlier that evening. Someone had opened it for the first time in years. I scrolled back through unread messages, confirmations that never reached me, holiday photos I was apparently supposed to want. Then the calendar app opened, and a new entry appeared. Family. Tentative. That made me snort despite myself. Even my phone wasn't committing. Another alert arrived. My attorney had sent the latest version of the acquisition agreement. At the top, a single line stood out. Sign by December 23rd. I opened the airline app, selected a late flight home, and watched the confirmation wheel spin as the purchase went through, my thumb hovering over the screen while the email receipt landed and the contract deadline waited, blinking patiently. The confirmation email for my flight landed before sunrise, and by the time the office lights came on, my phone was already buzzing. Word travels fast when people decide it should. By 9, 3 cousins I hadn't heard from in years had texted variations of the same message. Your mom said you're coming home. So glad you two are talking again. Family really does come first. None of them asked how that happened. At the office, the day moved forward without waiting for my personal life to catch up. Engineers argued over timelines. Legal flagged another clause. The acquisition agreement sat open on my screen, unchanged, patient. Somewhere between a stand-up meeting and a call with outside counsel, a group chat labeled Morgan Family Christmas lit up. An aunt typed, "This is so healing." Someone else added a tree emoji. A few minutes later, a private message came through. "Did you do something to upset your mother all those years ago?" my uncle asked. "She never cuts people off without a reason." That was the story now. Margaret as the reasonable one, me as the problem to be solved. At lunch, another text arrived. "She's always tried to protect you," a cousin wrote. "You were so stubborn back then." Back then had apparently been defined for me. By mid-afternoon, the decision to leave early had already been made, even if it hadn't been discussed out loud. Files were synced, documents were backed up. Daniel leaned against the edge of my desk while I packed a laptop and charger into my bag. "You're really going," he said. "For dinner," I replied. That's how it was presented. He nodded once. "Make copies of everything. Email them to yourself twice." "I already did." "Good." He paused. "The sale rumor hasn't gone past attorneys. No press, no announcements. So it didn't come from me. Definitely not from you." That narrowed things in a way neither of us said out loud. At the airport, the holiday crowd had already arrived. Families in matching sweaters, couples arguing quietly over seat assignments. My one-way ticket earned a second look from the agent at security. "Heading home for Christmas?" he asked. "Yes." "Just you?" "That's the plan." He waved me forward anyway, then stopped me again. My bag was flagged for inspection. The agent pulled out a neatly packed folder of documents, flipped through it, and frowned. "Work papers?" he asked. "Yes." "Lot of responsibility to carry on a holiday." "Tell me about it." He zipped the bag closed and handed it back like it weighed more than before. At the gate, Daniel's final text came through. 48 hours after Christmas, it read. That's the window. The deadline had been circled in red on my calendar for weeks. Now it felt closer, compressed by family expectations and small talk waiting on the other end of the flight. While boarding, my phone vibrated again. "Your mom's so excited," a relative wrote. "She's been planning all week." Planning had never included me before. The flight passed in pieces. A drink cart bumped my knee. Someone reclined too far. I reviewed the contract one last time, then closed it without signing. The screen went dark, reflecting a version of myself that didn't look particularly festive. When the plane descended, the group chat came alive again. "She's outside already," someone posted. Of course she is. The doors opened. Passengers filed out. At baggage claim, my suitcase appeared faster than expected, like it had someplace to be. Outside, the air was colder than I remembered. Margaret's car sat at the curb, engine running, headlights on. No message, no missed call, just her silhouette in the driver's seat, hands steady on the wheel, watching the terminal doors as I stepped toward the crosswalk, phone in one hand, contract deadline ticking closer with every step. The house looked the same from the outside, which felt intentional. Lights on, wreath centered, curtains drawn just enough to suggest warmth without promising it. Margaret walked ahead of me, keys already in her hand, not slowing down to see if I was following. Inside, coats were taken, names were called, and someone said my name like it had been waiting in storage. Hugs happened around me, not to me. Margaret stayed busy, directing traffic toward the dining room, correcting place settings, adjusting a chair that wasn't mine. The table had one extra seat now. It hadn't always. For a few years, that chair had disappeared entirely. Not broken, not moved, just gone, as if removing it would solve a space issue no one wanted to discuss. Tonight, it had returned, pulled close enough to the table to look intentional. Margaret didn't sit next to me. She chose the opposite end, posture straight, hands folded when she wasn't passing a dish. Conversation moved carefully, the way people talk around a subject they've all agreed not to name. "So, work's been busy?" an aunt asked. "Yes." "That's good," someone else added. "Keeps you out of trouble." Margaret's eyes stayed on her plate. The first few minutes passed like that. Small updates, weather comments, a story about a neighbor's dog. Margaret remained polite, distant, efficient. When she reached across the table, it was to refill someone else's glass. Eventually, she looked up. "So," she said, voice even, "are you doing okay now?" The room stilled. Not dramatically, just enough that forks paused. "Yes," I said. A beat passed. "Well," she continued, "are you stable?" That word landed heavier than it needed to. "I am." She nodded, as if confirming something for herself. Good. I worried. You left in such a rush. No one challenged that version. A cousin cleared his throat. I heard something about your company. Margaret's gaze shifted to me, curious now, interested. It sold, I said, recently. Her eyebrows lifted. Oh? A large firm acquired it, I added. The number was 150 million. The fork in my aunt's hand tapped the plate by accident. Someone laughed once, then stopped. Silence settled, not empty, but waiting. Margaret broke it. 150, she repeated. That's impressive. Her tone changed, not warmer, sharper, focused. Congratulations, she said. That must have taken a lot of work. Yes. And planning, she added. And trust. She leaned back slightly, finally looking comfortable. I always said you were capable, she continued. You just needed time. Time, apparently, had been 5 years of silence. Questions followed. Who bought it? When it closed? Whether I planned to move? Margaret asked most of them, nodding along with the answers, storing details. When a pause appeared, she filled it. You remember when you first left? She said, smiling thinly. We helped you get set up. Paperwork, bank things, all that boring stuff. I remember, I said. I still have copies, she went on, just in case. You never know when those old documents come in handy. My glass was suddenly full. I hadn't seen who poured it. That was new. Margaret noticed me noticing. Drink, she said lightly. It's Christmas. Around the table, shoulders relaxed. The tension shifted, replaced by something closer to relief. The problem child had turned out profitable. That helped. Someone joked about retirement. Someone else mentioned a cousin's tuition. Margaret listened, smiling, her attention circling back to me again and again. You should come by more often, she said, now that you're settled. Settled meant something different than it used to. When dessert plates were cleared, Margaret stood. Claire, she said, already moving toward the living room, can I talk to you for a minute? She didn't wait for an answer. Chairs scraped back, conversations resumed behind us, lower now, curious. I rose, pushed my chair in, and followed her past the tree, past the hallway, past the room that had stayed closed for years. The living room felt larger without the noise from the table. Plates clinked faintly in the kitchen. Someone laughed, then lowered their voice. Margaret closed the door halfway, not enough to shut anything out completely. She didn't sit, neither did I. There are a few things we should talk about, she said, while you're here. Okay. Her hands moved to the back of a chair, fingers resting there like she needed the support. You know how families help each other, Margaret continued, especially when things get complicated. Complicated how? She smiled, thin and practiced. You don't need all the details, just the outcome. That was familiar. Outcomes had always mattered more than explanations. There are some obligations, she said, loose ends. It would be easier to resolve them now. Resolve them how? With support, she met my eyes. Financial support. The word hung there. How much, I asked. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked to a cabinet near the wall and opened it. Inside were folders, neatly stacked. She pulled one out and held it against her chest. You've always been good at handling pressure, she said, better than most people give you credit for. That doesn't answer the question. It's not a number you'd miss, she replied. Not now. The gap between what she wanted and what she was saying narrowed fast. I can't do that, I said. Her expression tightened. You haven't even heard what it's for. I don't need to. Margaret sighed, the sound sharp. You always jump ahead. That's been your problem. She opened the folder. Inside were papers I recognized, old ones, copies of forms from years ago, address changes, bank letters, documents I had assumed were lost. You left in such a state, she said, flipping through them. Everything unfinished. Someone had to manage it. Manage it how? By keeping things from distracting you. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't look at it. You mean intercepting my mail, I said. I mean protecting you. So the letters that were returned, handled, she said, by me. The word landed harder than the money request. That email account, she continued, you never check it anymore. It seemed wasteful to let important messages sit unanswered. You logged into it, yes, for 5 years. Margaret closed the folder and placed it back in the cabinet with care. You wouldn't have gotten where you are if you'd been pulled back every time something came up here, she said. This way, you could focus. By not knowing. She stepped closer. And now you're successful. It worked. Silence filled the space she left between us. I didn't ask you to do that, I said. You didn't object. I didn't know. That's the same thing. In the kitchen, someone called Margaret's name. She ignored it. There are debts, she said, lowering her voice. Things that need to be closed. You have the means now. It makes sense. So the timing isn't a coincidence. Her mouth pressed into a line. Everything lines up eventually. That was the moment it became clear. The pattern wasn't complicated. Silence when I didn't comply. Distance as discipline. Contact restored once there was something to gain. I'm not giving you money, I said. Her eyes hardened. You owe this family. For what? For everything we did before you left. You cut me off. You walked away. I was blocked. You were stubborn. The words stacked neatly, one on top of the other, ready to hold weight they didn't deserve. I'm leaving, I said. Now? Yes. Margaret glanced toward the dining room, calculating how that would look. You can't just get up and go, she said. People will notice. I hope they do. She reached out, not quite touching my arm. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I'm not. Her hand dropped. I'll remember this, she said. That seems likely. I walked past her down the hallway and into the room where my coat hung. Voices drifted in from the dining room, still mid-conversation, unaware or pretending to be. The zipper snagged briefly before sliding up. Behind me, Margaret stepped into the doorway. We'll talk about this later, she said. The bedroom door clicked shut behind me, and the house settled into its nighttime routine without acknowledging that I was still there. The bedspread was neatly tucked, untouched. Clothes hung in the closet exactly where they had been left years ago, like someone had decided preservation mattered more than absence. My open suitcase sat on the floor, half filled, waiting for a decision that had already been made downstairs. Shoes came off first, then the jacket. The phone went face down on the dresser, screen dark, but not forgotten. A small box on the shelf caught my attention. It held old paperwork, the kind people keep because throwing it away feels irresponsible. Utility bills, college forms, copies of documents I hadn't thought about since my early 20s. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, I started sorting through them, not looking for anything in particular. That was how the first familiar page surfaced. A limited power of attorney, temporary, administrative. Signed by me, Margaret's name was printed neatly beneath mine. At the time, it had seemed harmless, helpful even. I was leaving in a rush, juggling leases, jobs, uncertainty. She offered to handle things I didn't have time for. Mail, banking transitions. Just until you're settled, she'd said. I had believed her because it was easier than arguing. Silence had always felt safer than conflict. More papers followed, correspondence that never reached me, notices that should have raised questions, gaps that now looked deliberate instead of accidental. The returned letters, the unanswered emails. They lined up differently once I stopped assuming good intent. The phone buzzed against the wood. Daniel's name lit the screen when I picked it up. You okay? He asked. Yes. He didn't comment on the tone. Did you ever revoke that power of attorney you mentioned a while back? No. A pause. Not long, just enough. Which county was it filed in? I don't remember. Oh, that's a problem, he said calmly. So what do I do? You check. First thing. No reassurance followed, no pep talk, just a next step. After the call ended, the room felt smaller. not because of emotion, but because clarity tends to do that. The idea that things had gone wrong slowly, quietly, over time, felt harder to swallow than the argument downstairs. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just control exercised through omission. The belief that kept showing up was familiar. Don't make it harder for anyone. Don't be difficult. Don't force people to choose sides. It had worked for years, until it hadn't. From the hallway came muted voices, plates being stacked, a television turning on, life continuing as if nothing had shifted. The house didn't hold grudges. People did. The laptop came out next. I logged into the county clerk's site, searched my name, and found more entries than expected. Some dated after I'd left, some updated recently. The feeling wasn't panic. It was something closer to precision. Calendar open. New appointment request. Local records office. Tomorrow morning. A confirmation email arrived seconds later. Downstairs, someone laughed. It sounded real. I closed the suitcase part way, then reopened it to add the folder from the shelf. Papers slid into place without resistance, like they'd been waiting to be moved. The cost of what came next didn't need to be listed. It was implied. Once a situation is handled through institutions instead of conversations, relationships tend to become historical records too. The door handle turned softly. Margaret knocked once and pushed it open without waiting. "We should talk," she said. "Tomorrow," I replied. Her eyes flicked to the suitcase. "You're leaving early." "Yes." "You're making this very formal." "That wasn't my choice." She stood there another second, then nodded. "We'll see." After she left, the door stayed open a crack. I closed it fully, zipped the suitcase, and set an alarm for the morning. The records office opened at 9. I arrived early enough that the clerk was still unlocking drawers, her coffee untouched. She took my ID, typed my name, and frowned slightly at the screen. "There's more here than I expected," she said. That was becoming a theme. Folders appeared, dates, signatures, amendments. Some documents were old, filed around the time I left home. Others were newer, uncomfortably recent. A local attorney met me across the hall an hour later. He didn't waste time easing into it. "You didn't just authorize mail handling," he said. "You authorized financial representation." "Temporarily." "Yes, but temporary powers don't expire on their own. They have to be revoked." He slid a document across the table. My signature stared back at me, clean and confident. Beneath it were entries showing that the authority had been used multiple times over the years. Loans, guarantees, extensions, all under my name. These weren't small, he continued. Several were tied to family businesses, others to personal debt. "Whose debt?" He paused. "Your mother's, and one of your uncle's." The pieces rearranged themselves without asking permission. Margaret, knowing where I lived. Emails accessed right before the acquisition rumor surfaced. The sudden urgency around Christmas. "This one," the attorney said, tapping the page, "was executed last month." That's impossible. Unless the person holding authority believed it was still valid. Or didn't care. Another file came out. This one showed a financial advisor's involvement, a relative, someone I'd seen at holidays, always asking about work, always offering advice I never took seriously. He helped structure these, the attorney said, likely to keep things from triggering immediate review. So it wasn't just her. No. The air in the room shifted, not emotionally, practically. "Some of these obligations are now tied to your net worth," he added, "which has changed recently." That was the other shoe. "So what happens next?" I asked. "If nothing is done, creditors may pursue you directly, especially now." The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was narrow. "Can I challenge this?" "Yes, but understand something." He leaned back. "The same documents that show misuse also show your name, your signature. That creates exposure." The idea that evidence could cut both ways wasn't new. Hearing it applied to my life was. "Am I in legal danger?" I asked. There's risk, he said carefully, enough that you should assume scrutiny. The phone buzzed on the table between us. Margaret's name appeared. I turned it face down. She'll likely escalate, the attorney continued, if she believes control is slipping. What kind of escalation? Pressure, legal arguments, possibly claims that you were aware. I wasn't. That will need to be proven. We went through next steps, revocations, notifications, protective filings. Each action had a timeline. None of them waited for family discussions. When the meeting ended, the hallway felt longer than before. Papers were heavier, consequences closer. Outside, the cold bit harder than it had the night before. The phone buzzed again. Margaret, still calling. A voicemail followed. "Claire," she said, voice measured, "we need to talk. You're misunderstanding things." Another buzz. A text this time. "You're overreacting." The lawyer's warning echoed without words. Once a situation reaches paper, conversations tend to turn strategic. At a stoplight, my phone rang again. Margaret's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. The acquisition agreement notification popped up immediately after. A reminder. Signed by December 23rd. 2 clocks were running now, and neither cared about my feelings. Back at the house, the driveway was empty. Inside, the living room was tidy, evidence of a morning reset. Margaret's purse sat by the door. She hadn't gone far. The phone buzzed again. Another call. Still unanswered. I set the documents on the table, laid them out in order, and took a photo of each page. Then another. Then emailed copies to myself and to Daniel. A message came back from him almost immediately. "Okay," he wrote. "This is bigger than we thought." Another call from Margaret interrupted the screen. This time it rang longer, persistent. I let it ring while the lawyer's final words replayed. "If you delay," he'd said, "you may lose control of the narrative." The request to sit down didn't sound like a request. By late afternoon, people had arrived under the assumption that something important was happening, even if no one said what. Chairs were pulled into the living room from the dining area. Coats stayed on. Phones stayed out. Margaret stood near the window, arms crossed. The family attorney took the seat closest to the coffee table, briefcase already open. A few relatives lingered by the doorway, unsure whether to commit. "We should talk before I head back to California," I said. "Everything, all at once." No one objected. That, more than anything, confirmed it was time. Folders went onto the table first, then copies, then a printed timeline clipped neatly. The attorney glanced at it, then at me. "Go ahead," he said. The first document slid forward. "This is a limited power of attorney," I said. "It expired. It was never renewed." Margaret leaned in. "That's not accurate." "It is," the attorney replied, calm. "The language is clear." Margaret waved him off. "You're misunderstanding. It was informal." The next page followed. "Here's where it was used anyway," I said. "Last month and the month before that." "That was administrative," she said quickly. "Just paperwork." "For a loan guarantee?" someone asked from the couch. Margaret turned. I was trying to keep things from becoming a problem. "That's not what this says," the attorney replied, pointing. "These transactions required active authorization." The third page landed. "This is the signature comparison," I said. "Mine, from 5 years ago. And this one." Margaret didn't look at it. "You told everyone you were helping me," I continued. "You were protecting me from distractions." "That's what parents do," she said. "They step in." The attorney cleared his throat. "May I?" He placed a single document on top of the stack. "This confirms the filing date," he said, "and identifies who submitted it." A name was printed there, not Margaret's, another relative's. The room shifted. "That can't be right," someone said. "It is," the attorney replied. "The notary has already verified it." Margaret shook her head. "This is being blown out of proportion." "For years?" an uncle asked. "You never mentioned this." "There was no need," she snapped. "Everyone benefited." That was when the story collapsed. Not loudly, not all at once. just enough that no one rushed to fix it. "I didn't know about any of this," I said. "I didn't agree to it, and I won't carry it." Margaret's voice sharpened. "You're turning your back on family." "I'm reading documents," I replied. "That's different." The attorney nodded. "Given the misuse, the accounts tied to these authorizations will be frozen pending review." "What?" Margaret said. "Temporarily," he added. "Effective immediately." Someone swore under their breath. Another person stood up, then sat back down. "This doesn't have to happen," Margaret said, looking around the room. "We can handle it privately." "Too late," the attorney said. Margaret's eyes found mine. "You could stop this." "I already did," I said. She stared, searching for something familiar to latch onto. There wasn't much left. "At least now," I added, "everyone's reading the paperwork before deciding who to believe." No one laughed. No one argued. The attorney gathered the documents methodically. Phones buzzed as notifications arrived. Accounts freezing. Access denied. Pending review. Margaret sank into a chair, hands gripping the armrests as if they might slide away. "We'll talk later," she said, softer now. "Not today," I replied. The meeting didn't end formally. People drifted. Conversations broke into fragments. No one met Margaret's eyes on the way out. The attorney closed his briefcase. "I'll be in touch," he said. As the front door opened and cold air rushed in, Margaret remained seated, staring at the empty table where the papers had been, while my phone vibrated again with updates still coming through, each one landing in real time as the room stayed frozen around her. Morning arrived without ceremony. The house settled into a version of itself that felt smaller, as if the walls had adjusted overnight. Dishes from the night before were stacked neatly. Chairs were pushed back under the table. One of them remained slightly out of line. Margaret was already awake. She sat at the kitchen table with a mug she hadn't touched, staring past the window rather than through it. Papers were spread in front of her now, not the ones she preferred. Official envelopes, requests, notices, words that didn't bend. No one else lingered. Relatives who had filled the house the day before moved quickly that morning. Cars started and left without long goodbyes. A cousin waved from the driveway, but didn't stop. Someone else pretended to be late. The pattern was obvious. Distance, once introduced, tends to organize itself efficiently. Margaret finally looked up when I stepped into the kitchen. "We didn't have to do this," she said. The sentence hung there alone. No explanation followed. None was needed. I poured coffee into a travel mug and set the lid without responding. The sound of it clicking into place felt final enough. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, then turned it face down. The gesture came a day too late to read as control. In the living room, my suitcase waited by the door. Everything inside was packed with intention. Nothing left behind required retrieval. That felt new. The email arrived while I slipped on my coat. Subject line plain, language precise. Temporary legal freeze confirmed. Next steps outlined. No opinions offered. The laptop opened briefly on the counter. A new folder appeared. Family events. The confirmation email went there. Seeing the name in the directory list earned a small reaction. Not a laugh, just a pause. Then the lid closed. Margaret stood as I reached for the handle. "You're really leaving," she said. "Yes. This isn't over." "That depends," I replied. Her shoulders dropped slightly, like she'd been carrying something she could no longer pass off. The chair at the table remained empty behind her, angled toward where I'd sat the night before. Outside, the air cut cleaner. The car started without hesitation. As the house receded in the mirror, nothing chased it. At the airport, the usual holiday motion had thinned. Lines moved. Announcements echoed without urgency. My boarding pass scanned on the first try. Daniel texted, "On your way?" "Yes." "Good. We'll handle the rest." That was all. Security waved me through. Shoes stayed on, bag zipped. No secondary check this time. At the gate, travelers arranged themselves into familiar shapes. Families clustered. Individuals hovered near outlets. An older couple argued quietly about seat numbers. Someone nearby complained about delays that didn't apply here. The phone buzzed again. Margaret's name appeared, then disappeared. No voicemail followed. A new message came instead, from an unknown number. "We should talk." It stayed unread. The final call for boarding sounded overhead. Passengers stood, stretching and collecting belongings with practiced movements. I joined the line, suitcase rolling behind me, grip steady in my hand. As the line advanced, the folder on my laptop stayed closed, the chair at the table stayed empty, and the house that once decided who I was moved further out of range while the boarding door opened and I stepped forward with the others, not looking back as the line carried me ahead.